Yates' soul clap, all neglect, monuments of an aging intellect. We have in Ireland, we're very blessed to have him. I think we can say an intellectual, a thinker, an activist, someone who has fought for 50 years?
Nearly.
Approximately 50 years for Irish independence. Tony's voice and ideas are known and respected, not just in Ireland, but across Europe. So I give you Professor Anthony Cockman. Thank you very much.
Gwyn wyll at ahas mór an bhean in ov kaint an ábhar háchtach seo an ócáid táchtach seo. I'm very honored to have the opportunity of speaking here today. The great French President Charles de Gaulle once said, Europe is made up of the nations and the states, or it is nothing. The European Union has attempted to abolish the democracy of the nation states of Europe and to establish a superpower, a kind of United States of Europe under German, French hegemony and control. It has set out to hollow out the nation states of Europe, to take away people's national democracy and independence in the interest of this fantastic reactionary and anti-democratic project. And the people here who've come this morning are obviously concerned about that, and concerned that we go deeper into it, and concerned that we would not take the opportunity, now that the people of the United Kingdom are leaving the EU, including 1.8 million of our fellow countrymen and women in the north of Ireland, that we should be so foolish as to stay in this reactionary setup and go deeper and deeper in, which is what the French and Germans are planning. I've been concerned all my adult life with the EU. I've been opposed to it on democratic and internationalist grounds. By democratic, one means that people should have the right to make their own laws through people they elect. That is no longer the case in the European Union, where, as you know, vast numbers of laws, mainly in the economic area, some social laws, come from Brussels. The EU itself has estimated there are around over 100,000 legal acts, directives, regulations, decisions, judgments of the European Court of Justice and international conventions and standards which the EU subscribes to, and which are binding in supranational law on us. And if we defy or break any one of these, we're subject to fines. The EU has taken away from us our currency. As Prodi, former Commission President, said, the two pillars of the nation state are the sword and the currency, and we have changed that. They've got the currency. It's vitally important that we have a currency of our own to enhance our economic competitiveness, as clearly seen by the problems in relation to the North and North-South trade at the present time. When we had a currency of our own, following independent policy in the period 1994-2000, it gave us the Celtic Tiger, 7 or 8% growth rates each year. So they've taken the currency and they're heading towards getting the sword, a European army, and this PESCO outrage, which we signed up to in January, is a big step in the direction of a European army, which the French and Germans and others want to establish in due course, and will leave our tattered neutrality blowing in the wind. There's a democratic reaction against this assault on democracy all over Europe at the present time. The people of the United Kingdom, the majority, 17 million voters or so, said we want to leave it. We don't want to go into this federal superstate run by a narrow group of committees dominated by the Germans and the French. Nigel Farage has been a hero of British democracy and is admired all over Europe for his stand for democracy generally. In my opinion, the EU is fundamentally a doomed entity, because you can't take things away from people, their national democracy and their national independence, without them reacting against it. Whether it's on the left or right is largely immaterial. People on the left want independence to have left-wing measures, people on the right want independence to have right-wing measures, but unless you've got an independent state in the first place, able to pass its own laws, you can get neither. So, in effect, the national question, the question of national independence, transcends the usual differences between left and right and gives rise to popular movements against the EU scheme or EU project and to re-establish national democracy and independence in the various countries of Europe. And that is now happening. It is important that it happen here. It would be utter folly, in my opinion, for the Irish state to remain in the European Union and go deeper into it when the British leave. I believe the British will leave. At the present time, the Irish establishment is in consternation over this development. They are so Europhile, and they hope the whole thing can be stopped or aborted. I don't believe it can be. It may be a complex process, but the United Kingdom is going to leave the EU, including 1.8 million of our fellow countrymen and women in the north of Ireland. It is folly for us to stay in it in those circumstances. At present, Irish people don't know. Nobody is quite sure yet what exactly Brexit is going to amount to. We don't know the character of the eventual EU-UK deal. It's only when that happens, probably within the coming year, that Irish public opinion will sit up and begin to realise the folly of us staying in the EU when the United Kingdom leaves. At present, people are just waiting to see how it all turns out. I've not the least doubt that over the coming year, significant sections of Irish public opinion, agriculturalists, trade unionists, workers, housewives, and let us hope some politicians will raise the issue of us leaving the EU also and not facilitating another partition of Ireland, which of course would be involved if we stay in the EU and the United Kingdom leaves it, adding all sorts of new dimensions to the north-south border. This little booklet, which contains the proceedings of a study group that some colleagues of mine brought together, various economists and lawyers, sets out the arguments for that position. There are no good arguments, in my opinion, for staying in the EU if the United Kingdom leaves. And I would suggest that maybe people here could use this to take this away with them and perhaps form local study groups and discuss it with your neighbours and friends and help to build up a movement to demand that we no longer identify with Team EU, but that our government should identify with Ireland, with Irish independence and with Irish national democracy. Just a few concluding remarks. The EU is essentially an institutional monstrosity that robs the peoples of Europe of their national democracy and national independence in the interest of powerful political, economic and bureaucratic elites that operate at supranational level but have their political acolytes and media groupies in every EU state. And we've got plenty of them here. The fundamental ideological thrust of the EU, in my opinion, is to undo the democratic legacy of the French Revolution, which is, of course, the right of nations to self-determination, a fundamental principle of international law, a fundamental democratic principle, embodied in the United Nations Charter, the right of nations to self-determination, and we, of course, led by our politicians, have given up that right to the European Union, whose laws, of course, have primacy over the Irish Constitution in all areas covered by the treaties. So we need to get back our national independence and democracy. Successive EU treaties, there have been a whole series of them. As Herman said, we were told to just a common market, a free trade area with an agricultural policy attached, way back in 1972-3 when we joined it. But we've got all sorts of treaties. We've got, above all, the currency union. And now they're pressing on towards a military union with the PESCO business. Successive EU treaties have hollowed out Europe's nation states in the interests of transnational high finance and big capital. Democrats across the EU are now reacting against this. Politically, in my opinion, the EU is a Franco-German racket, an attempt by Berlin, supported by Paris, holding on to Berlin's coattails, to dominate Europe by peaceful means, having failed to do that by physical force during World War I and World War II. The PESCO scheme so-called Permanent Structured Cooperation in Defence and Military Business, which we signed up to in December, is a shameful step in that direction, which makes really a nonsense of pretensions to be a neutral state. It's pushing the EU towards a military union to supplement the economic and political union that was brought into being by the Treaty of Lisbon, which gave the European Union its federal constitution and made us all real citizens of it, as in any normal federation. Through the Eurozone and the 2012 fiscal treaty, the EU has imposed a form of financial feudalism on Europe that has ravaged the economies of the Mediterranean countries and Ireland a few years ago. The 64 billion of private bank debt that was imposed on Irish taxpayers was a direct result of us being a member of the Eurozone and being subject to what Mr. Trichet, the head of the European Central Bank at the time, said: no bank must be let go bust, because otherwise contagion would spread. So Irish taxpayers can take that on board for a few generations. So that showed the reactionary and backward character of this entity. By leaving the European Union along with the United Kingdom, and thereby preventing the addition of a whole new dimension to the north-south border in a new partition of Ireland, we can take back control of our laws, our borders, our currency, our fisheries, our foreign policy, and have a meaningful neutrality policy if we so desire. The Irish people in the Nice referendum in 2001 and the Lisbon Treaty referendum in 2008 said no, we want to stop. They voted no to those treaties, which are important steps towards further integration, above all Lisbon, which gave the EU its constitution. It was like the canary in the proverbial coal mine, a warning to our political class not to go further. But the political class ignored those votes and reran the referendums on exactly the same treaties and pushed them through in a travesty of democracy. The Irish political class, we're a one-party state with two big parties, different branches of the same party. And sundry minor parties holding on to their coattails. Our politicians have sold off the country, shamefully, to their shame, without shame, without compunction, without political insight, without cherishing the democracy and independence that was handed down to them from the past. They've handed it away. It's essentially a monstrous thing they have done. And many of them don't realise it, perhaps, but it's a monstrous thing they have done. And the Irish people need to tell them that. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that in my opinion, what is most needed in Ireland now is the movement of democratic citizens, regardless of whether they're on the left, right or centre in politics, to restore our national independence, democracy and sovereignty vis-à-vis the EU. And we should take advantage of the decision of the people of Britain and the United Kingdom as a whole to leave the EU in order to take advantage of that situation. In my view, getting back democracy, independence and sovereignty can only be done by our breaking with this superpower, which is going to have further integration, particularly within the Eurozone, in the time ahead. We should align ourselves with our fellow countrymen and women in the north of Ireland. We would thereby encourage other smaller countries to do the same. In my opinion, it's inevitable that such a movement will develop in time, and this meeting today can be a significant step in helping to bring it into being in the months and years ahead. Thank you.